You're listening to the Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse at bellydancegeek.com.
Hi, everybody. It's Nadira, and welcome to the Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse. I'm Nadira Jamal, your hostess, and welcome to episode 13. We've actually been at this for an entire year, so we had our Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse birthday just this week, and I'm really happy that you can be here for our second year of episodes. So the Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse is a place where dance geeks can get together and explore all the kinds of information that's hard to get in classes and on DVDs. It's really easy to get help with the what, things like moves, combinations, choreography, but it's a lot harder to learn about the why and the how. So things like musicality and culture, dance composition, stagecraft, business, ethics, and so on. And so every month, I'm going to interview a different guest expert on a different geeky topic. And we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers, so you can geek out too. So if you think that knowledge and creativity go together like chocolate and peanut butter, you are in the right place. My guest today is Amity Alize. She's the founder of Rock On Dance Studio and director of the Rockettes Dance Troupe. Amity is also an event organizer and workshop host to national and international stars, business advisor for dancers, and a teacher and mentor to thousands of students. She promotes positive self-esteem and body love through a warm, encouraging environment and has won an educational program award for Middle Eastern dance on a collegiate level. She studied Middle Eastern folkloric and Oriental dance for over a decade, primarily under Alia Thabit and Julie Eason. She's also attended over 100 master workshops, including traveling to the Middle East. She performs at weddings, celebrations, and in theater shows, and also with live bands. Check her out at rockon.net, spelled RAQ-ON.net. So today, Amity is going to talk to us about how to host a workshop without driving yourself crazy. So welcome, Amity.
Hello, Nadira.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's jump right in. One of the things about workshops is that they seem really easy on the surface, right? You get a venue, you get somebody to come, you invite people, and then you have this fun dance workshop. But what usually happens is that you end up seeing workshop instructors stress, losing money, and you're not enjoying this fabulous instructor that they've just invited in. So what are the mistakes that workshop hosts make that cost them money and stress?
You're totally right about that. A good workshop host will make sure that you don't see the sweat on her forehead and you'll still see a smile. But behind the scenes, there is a lot of work to it. To start with, the number one, probably most common pitfall is not planning enough in advance and getting as much stuff done further in advance than what you would normally think. For example, with marketing, you have to get the word out as soon as possible because not everybody can instantly get days off. They have kids, they have family, they have to coordinate schedules. And there also may be other events already out there. So the earlier that you get your marketing out, the more chance that you'll have a more successful event.
And about how far in advance do you recommend starting?
I start all my workshop event planning, like my 2014 schedule is already done and announced. I usually start at least a year in advance. I know some people start 6 months, some people start 3 months. I think 3 months is kind of pushing it, especially if you're in an area where there are a lot of other workshops and other dancers. And also a lot of people with busy schedules, they can't coordinate kids' soccer games or work schedules to get there.
Gotcha. And what are some of the things that they need to do that far in advance?
Obviously, the first thing you need to do is start open communication with whoever you want to host. And a lot of professional dancers that tour internationally, they're already booked a year in advance, sometimes 2 years in advance. So it's finding a spot in their schedule that works for you, the local community, and the workshop instructor. So first thing first is finding out who do you want to host and whether or not you can actually afford them. And that kind of falls into the next thing of a common pitfall is budgeting.
Okay. So, it seems like workshops the cost should be straightforward, right? You get the space, you have the workshop instructor's fee. What else is there really?
Well, there's many other things, and depending on the instructor, or depending on the venue, the way that the pricing works is totally different. So every situation could be a different barrel of monkeys. So other things to think about, you also have event insurance. You have marketing. Marketing can eat up a budget very quickly. Travel costs, hotels, lodging, food, ticketing, even just the small things like providing food to the dancers behind the scenes, or a thank you gift such as flowers. These are all things you want to build into your budget when you're coming up with the pricing rather than after the fact.
Gotcha. And how do you recommend that people go about figuring out their costs before they book?
I would start with a budgeting spreadsheet and just coming up with the basic things that you know that you absolutely need. For example, you know you're going to need a venue. You're going to need to have a performance venue if you're going to have a show. Sometimes you can find a dance studio that works for both. You also need to find out from your instructor how they like to be paid. Some of them get paid on an hourly basis. Some of them are a percentage. Some of them are actually a hybrid. So it might be $200 an hour or 70-30, whichever is greater. So it's just figuring out how many people can you host in the space that you are using and how much other expenses. So you have the instructor, you have the venue, you have the space, you have your marketing, you have your ongoing expenses. And then the other things to think about on top of those expenses that you kind of want to build in, especially if you're going to start doing this on an ongoing basis, is good equipment. So you might want to consider start putting in a little bit of extra to upgrade a sound system or a lighting system, or to pay an announcer or a DJ. These are all things you need to think about ahead of chance and then build it into your budget. So the goal is, first thing first, is just sitting down and thinking and brainstorming of everything that you possibly could have, taking all those expenses, totaling them up, taking the space that you have available. Say your space only holds 30 people. If you divide your total expenses by the number of spaces available, you have to determine whether or not people are willing to spend that amount to come to your workshop. So for example, if you have a day and your space only holds 20 people and your expenses end up being $200 per spot, that's your break even. Are people in your area going to be willing to pay $200 for a day's worth of workshop? If not, you might have to go back and revisit, find a cheaper space, or maybe even find a different instructor.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like that break-even point is really your go or no-go decision maker, right? If you can't reasonably break even, there's probably no point doing it unless you just really want to study with that instructor.
Right. Well, sometimes there's non-financial benefits to hosting a workshop too, and I think a lot of people focus on the financial. There are such amazing networking opportunities, and there's also just the experience of hanging out with some of the best dancers in the world and just spending a weekend with them. It's fun to learn about their life stories and where they came from and how they got to where they are now, and just finding out that they're normal, average people. It's really fun. So, and not to mention, even if you lose a little bit of money on your workshop, think about the money that you're saving from not having to travel to them.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, you can spend a lot of money, especially if you're not in a large city with a big dance community where the workshop instructors are coming in all the time anyway.
Exactly.
I think you get a little spoiled in Boston.
Yeah.
But I know people who, drive from Boston to Montreal to study with some of the big Egyptian stars who end up teaching there, and it's a ways. It's like something like a 6-hour drive, an entire weekend of like hotel costs and such, and so that definitely would be a reason to do it yourself, even if you don't end up pulling a profit.
Right, exactly. You might actually end up losing exactly what you would have paid, and you've been able to hang out with a wonderful instructor. Granted, you are doing work during weekends, so just keep that in mind. But again, if you plan more in advance, that gives you more time and space to be there and be present and enjoy the workshop rather than running around stressed and just not enjoying it as much.
So speaking of planning in advance, what are some of the things that people have to do absolutely far in advance, and what things can they save for later on, closer to date?
The most important thing is securing the instructor and securing the space, and then also doing the marketing. I would say that those are the 3 top things to do immediately in advance. Make sure that you have a contract. Make sure you have a contract with the space and the venue. And those are the imperative must-haves. When you get closer to the date, depending if they're international, you might want to book their traveling farther in advance, but if they're within the country, you might be able to actually get a better deal closer to the date. Or another thing to think about is, gathering your assistants for the day and talking to the performers. You can do that a little bit closer. But as always, the more advanced notice that you give people, the better product you're going to put out.
Now, you mentioned assistants. I'm one of those people who likes to have control over every detail, and so for me, delegating is really tough. Can you tell us what role you see for assistants in the workshop process?
Sure, totally. I am also that type A person that likes to control everything, too. I learned very quickly that you will burn out and not enjoy hosting workshops. So it's learning how to hand off things that can be handed off and also providing backup information so people are trained. With workshop assistants, obviously you can't manage the door, drive the instructor around, set up for the show, make sure performers are checked in, make sure registration's checked in. You have all these random things that just might happen during the day. So having assistants is your best friend, and don't be afraid to ask for help. With assistants, what I do personally is I have a job brief for every different position that I need depending on the size of the event. It is broken out by time frame. So, for example, at 10 o'clock, I ask them to come set up the tables, the chairs for the registrations and help the vendors. And then it's just broken out each time slot and where they need to be and what they need to do. And if they have any questions, then that's kind of their resource just in case I'm not available. A lot of people just ask for volunteers during events. Other ones are paid. There's a lot of hubbies that are always volunteers. And the other thing to consider is that if you're asking for them to do a lot of work is to reward them so that you have trained people that come every single time and are willing to help. So what we tend to do is that I offer one free workshop slot per event, and that person is there for the entire day helping out. And it provides people an opportunity who may not be able to afford to attend otherwise to come, and it's also less stress for me because I know that they're committed to being there. Sometimes with volunteers, at the last minute, something happens, the kid's sick, or they may not just be as dedicated as if somebody was actually receiving something as a benefit for being there.
Gotcha. And can you tell us about some of the different roles that you ask your volunteers to fill or your compensated helpers to fill?
Sure, definitely. I love to pick out my instructors for their breakfast. So I always make sure that I have somebody who's actually opening the studio the night before I go in and set up as much as I can. And I always have an assistant open the studio, get everybody registered, make sure liability waivers are signed, that performers have dropped off their music, so that first morning the workshop instructor can sleep in later, and I don't have to get them up early so I can drive them to the studio while I'm setting up. They can sleep in later, we go out for breakfast, and then we head to the studio. By the time we get to the studio, everybody's already settled in. It just makes it for a smoother day for the instructor and also for all the participants, because then they have another person there that they can contact. Another example is having a stage manager, making sure if everybody out back is ready, all set, random safety pin emergencies, random spelling emergencies, sound system glitches, they happen. So having an extra set of hands is always helpful in those situations too.
I did against a show once where the organizer had a volunteer backstage the entire time whose sole purpose was to make sure that everybody had enough pinning help and could tell whether the back of their hair was arranged properly, and it was the most luxurious thing I've ever experienced as a performer.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Like just suitable helpers is awesome.
Yes, they're worth every penny and every thank you and every bribery of chocolate and coffee.
Cool. So, we talked a little bit about making sure that you get help. But, what things that happen on the day of really need to be done by you, the organizer?
Well, as long as you have most of it done in advance, you won't have to do too much the day of so you can actually participate. People want to see you as an event organizer. They want to see the person behind the scenes. But if you're always behind the scenes and they never can meet you, you never meet that connection. So I try to make sure that I am actually doing the workshop with people as much as possible. But, if people have questions, they're willing to come up with me. Before the show, I always give people a, break a hip scarf type speech to make sure everybody feels comfortable, making sure that the workshop instructor has everything that she needs, such as bottled water, that her program handouts are printed and ready for the workshops, making sure that the lineup is posted. And also, sometimes I do the announcing myself. But generally just being there and being present.
So it sounds like it's more about being a good hostess than the organizer at that point.
Exactly, yeah. You want to make sure you have it all done in advance so that you can actually enjoy it. You've spent hours organizing this. You've been, handing out flyers. You've been doing a whole bunch of information. You've been doing budgeting. You've been doing negotiations. And, the benefit of hosting workshops is sometimes you have an opportunity to pick out workshop topics that you want to learn too. And it's nothing fun if you're sitting out back filling out lineup forms for the show that night or changes in the program when you could actually be dancing with everybody and enjoying the moment.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that people forget to do that can keep them from participating?
It varies on the day. What I do, I've forgotten silly things as picking out my own music before I get on stage. I've done things as, forgotten a costume piece, or I've started doing the workshops and realizing that, I need to put the chairs out and the lighting still needs to be tested, or I need to go run out and get food for the instructor. It depends on the day. There's no consistency. However, I highly recommend everybody coming up with a checklist that you live and die by every single time. And it grows as you grow as an instructor too, and it also depends on each event. So what I have is I have a checklist that's before the event, during the event, and after the event, just to make sure I have all my ducks in a row.
I am such a fan of checklists. You are talking to the right person.
A lot of dancers make checks. What's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying a lot of dancers have checklists for their dig bags. Make sure that they have extra safety pins, that they have the top, they have the bottom, they have the veil, they have the lipstick. It's the same thing for hosting events.
And do you ever provide checklists to any of your helpers?
Yes, definitely. Every helper in every position has a kind of a checklist duties, again, by date or time during the event. And they enjoy it, and it makes it so much easier for them, too, because they know exactly what they need to do, and it reduces their stress as well. Because a lot of people who are volunteering, they've never done anything like this, so to reduce their stress so that they can still enjoy the workshops, too, is important.
Gotcha. Now, one thing that I've heard about a little bit recently in some of my conversations with some bigger name dancers is this whole, tax and immigration thing. Can you tell us about, it seems like a lot of people think, oh, well, all I have to do is write a check to the workshop instructor. But my understanding is that in some cases you may be responsible for tax forms, too. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. Tax forms are very important. Disclosure, I'm a CPA, so I'm kind of a nerd in this area. But, I'm actually surprised. I've hosted a lot of dancers, and I always have to say it in advance because a lot of them actually don't want tax forms sometimes. And I'm really shocked and sometimes disappointed because then I can't host them because I have a license to protect. But it also, the benefit of actually doing the tax forms is that it shows that you're a bona fide dancer. And especially with dancers that don't make a lot of money at this, if you have the tax forms, it shows that you're actively trying to earn income and that it's not just a hobby. So it's important on the workshop instructor side as well. But from the host side, anytime you pay a U.S. resident more than $600 for services, you're required to file a 1099 miscellaneous form for them at the end of the year. In order to actually provide the 1099, they need to provide you with the tax information such as their social security number or their business employer identification number, name and address, and then signing off that they're a U.S. resident. And that's done on IRS form number W-9. And then at the end of the year, you fill out the forms and you can buy carbon copies at Staples. It's not too hard of a form. It's probably one of the easier forms from the IRS. Hardy har har. But it protects you as a business person because you are required to file them there is no and, ifs, or buts on that. If you pay somebody for services, you have to provide them a 1099. Either they're an employee or they're an independent contractor. As an employee, you receive a W-2. As an independent contractor, you receive a 1099. The penalties for not filing them can range anywhere from $30 to $250 per occurrence. And the same thing as on the host side as the instructor side, it also shows that you're a bona fide business as well. Once you start hosting foreign dancers, you're getting into a whole other muddy multitude of tax reporting. And honestly, this area is about as clear as mud, and it's changing immensely right now. So there's going to be more regulations coming in the upcoming year. However, you can't have a foreign dancer fill out a W-9 or provide them a 10-9 at the end of the year because they're not a U.S. resident. Anybody that comes into the United States and works and performs services, they have to pay U.S. taxes. And you, as the organizer, you are actually technically responsible for collecting those taxes on the behalf of that individual and submitting them to the IRS. If you don't do that and you are caught, on top of the fines and penalties of not filing, you could be responsible for up to a third of their income that you were supposed to spend will have to come out of your pocket. So it depends on the instructor and where they're from, because actually it's up to 30%, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the full amount. We have treaties with other countries, for example, Canada, Mexico. There are even some in Egypt, but it depends on a case-by-case basis. So I highly recommend if you're going to start hosting foreign dancers, become good friends with an international tax accountant or tax attorney so that they can help you fill out the forms and guide the instructor along the way as well.
Gotcha. Now, I can't speak to international dancers, but in terms of the 1099 MISC, that's, you know, it sounds like this huge, oh my God, I have to fill out a tax form thing, but it's actually not that hard.
Nope, if you can fill out in an envelope, you can fill out a 1099.
Yeah, I had to do that for my dance studio rental, apparently, and it was very straightforward. I got it done in about 10 minutes, so don't let that keep you from hosting workshops because it's not scary.
Yes. No, it's definitely not scary. And you can get the forms pretty much at every office supply store at the end of the year, and you can do them carbon copy. You don't even have to do them on a computer and buy an expensive system. But it is important for you because you want to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also talked about proving that you're running a business and not a hobby. Can you tell us why that's important, Ms. Tax Advisor?
Yep. It's a performing artist, starving artist syndrome, unfortunately, because there's a lot of dancers. We all know we put in hours, countless time, ungodly amounts of money into costuming and workshops. And the IRS determines whether or not you're running a business or a hobby. And some dancers, you know, just like models or any other startup business, you tend to lose money in the beginning before you start to earn money. You have to make a name for yourself. So with the IRS, in the IRS's eye, there used to be a rule called 3 out of 5. It's kind of died out now, and it's more facts and circumstances. But if you keep collecting losses on your tax return and offsetting your income from other areas, the IRS is going to come in and question and say, do you have a profit motive? Are you really in business? Otherwise, why are you losing money? So you can either be defined as an actual business. You know, a lot of people have names for their businesses, or they have a DBA, or they're registered, or they may have a separate employer identification number for them, or they might just be a hobbyist. Even if you make money as a belly dancer as a hobby, you still have to claim total worldwide income on your tax return. The difference between a bona fide business and a hobbyist is that the hobbyist can only take their income and offset it with expenses to come to zero. They can't take a loss. So if you make $1,000 a year off belly dancing, you can only take $1,000 of your expenses to offset that income. Some years you might make money, some years you might lose money, but you can never generate a loss. With a business, you can generate losses as long as you prove that you have a profit motive and that there's facts and circumstances around it that show that you are trying to generate income in the future.
So if you spent a lot on costumes and workshops this year and you ended up losing money instead of making money, if you can prove that you're actually trying to earn money and run a business, you can deduct the loss, not just you actually spent.
Right. Versus if you are a dancer who just takes dance classes, but you buy 20 Bella costumes in 1 year and you had a $50 gig, and you're trying to claim a huge loss because of you bought all the Bellas, that's going to be harder to substantiate as a business.
Gotcha. Ooh, that's geeky. I love it. Go ahead.
I was just saying, it depends on everybody's personal situation. And the other thing to consider is in the state that you're doing the workshop. If you plan on doing multi-state workshops, that means that you have to register your business in multiple states. The other things to consider if you're selling products is that you may possibly have sales tax. And some states, actually, a lot of dancers don't know this, but there's some states that have caught so many performing artists getting paid under the table that they actually require the performing arts venue to withhold taxes on their behalf before they even get paid.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, just be wary of the states sometimes if you're going to a different state, and you might have a smaller paycheck than you expect. I get a common email from that every once in a while from dancers asking, they took money out. Could they do that? And technically, yes, they can.
So where would you go to find that kind of information? Like your state's Department of Revenue, or?
Most states have a great Department of Revenue account. A lot of them have a telephone hotline that you can call. And you can even do a blind call if you don't feel comfortable talking about your specific situation. But most states are actually very easy to work with. You can also look up your local Small Business Administration or SCORE, and they're always willing to help out, point you in the right direction.
Now, I don't know what SCORE means. Can you tell us about that?
What's that?
I'm not sure what SCORE means.
SCORE is a group of retired professionals, usually lawyers, attorneys, accountants, CPAs, or people that have just been in business for a long period of time. And they're a great resource for dancers, especially if you don't have the funding to go to a professional lawyer to set up an actual business. They can lead you through the process. It's all volunteers.
Gotcha. So you can get advice and help even if you can't afford to hire a professional.
Exactly.
Cool. I'd like to ask you kind of an unusual, it's a little bit off topic, but it's kind of looking at this workshop hosting idea from the other direction. So let's say you're the workshop instructor. What can you do to make life easy for your workshop hosts?
Have your information readily available. For example, I'm noticing with a lot of newer dancers, because I like to host dancers that are seasoned, and I like to find the next up-and-coming dancers and host them. It is very common in the past to have like a media kit. And in the past, the media kits used to be, you ask them to mail it to you. The easiest thing, and the thing that I absolutely love when dancers do, is to actually either, as soon as I contact them via email or phone, is that our next correspondence automatically includes their listing of workshop topics, their rate, their sample contract, and the dates that they're easily available. They might even include pictures for promotion. Another one that I've seen that I absolutely loved was that a dancer had a secret page on their website that just had all the information I could download easily right off their website. And that's like an absolute workshop host dream. Because there's nothing else that's more frustrating than trying to track down all the pertinent information to make flyers, to do your marketing. Because if you go online and you go to somebody's Facebook page and they're like, yeah, just take any pictures you want, you don't know which ones they've been tagged and that they actually don't own, or which photos are actually copyrighted. So it's harder from the host perspective. The other benefit of having the media kit readily available is that you can kind of market yourself the way that you want to. You can pick out which pictures portray what your mission, vision, goal of the dance is.
Gotcha. So that's really good advice for beforehand. Do you have any recommendations for once they arrive on site?
Once they arrive on site, pretty much that's my job. My job is to make sure that they have their food, they have their water, that they're comfortable, that their MP3 player is ready to play. What I usually do when I'm hosting dancers, I send them an informational request form too. So do you need an assistant for all your vending supplies? Are you teaching off MP3 or CD? Is there any special requests for food? We have a lot of dancers who eat very, very healthy. So I make sure that those opportunities are available for them. And then if there's any additional information that I need to make them feel comfortable.
Gotcha. That sounds
good. My job is to make sure that they are completely relaxed and ready to teach their best and perform their best the day of.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So I've actually reached the end of my list of questions for you. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that I didn't ask you about that you think is important for people to know before they start hosting workshops?
I was going to say, if you're interested in hosting workshops, volunteer to help with somebody else's. That's the best way to learn, and to let them know that, you know, that they have opportunities to have help too. But it also gives you a hands-on experience before jumping into the deep end of all the different moving pieces of hosting workshops. So maybe one time you help with registration, the next time you help behind the scenes at the show. You can even help volunteer with the marketing. It helps get your foot wet before, again, jumping in.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like your apprenticeship before it all becomes your problem.
Exactly. And then you can start thinking about your own checklists and ways to improve and what you like, what they do, and vice versa. And a lot of workshop and hosts, we all talk and, you know, find ways that we can make jobs easier.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to open up our line to questions and answers in just a little bit. So I have a couple more follow-up questions for you, but before you do that, I want to tell people how you can ask questions. So if you have a question for Amity about workshops, if you're on the webcast, you can type your question into the box at left. Just be sure to include your name so I know who you are. And if you're on the phone or on Skype, you can press *2 to raise your hand. So on the phone, that's *2 on your phone keys. And on Skype, that's *2 on your Skype keypad, not on your computer's keyboard. All right. Well, waiting for it to come in. If listeners take one thing away from this call, what would you want that to be?
I'm guessing the most important thing is to get organized and far in advance and just leave enough time. And don't forget to breathe the day of. They're meant to be fun. They're not meant to be super stressful.
Excellent. Now, if people want to learn more from you or they want to get, more in-depth help for planning workshops, how can they do that?
They can totally contact me anytime. My website's raq-on.net, and I actually just published a little booklet on my website under classes for professional dancers, a booklet on workshop hosting, and it's just the basics 101, working with your instructor, figuring out a budget, even has checklists of what to do before the event, during the event, post the event, how to book the performances, what you need to do the event day of, sample contracts, sample confirmations to send to people once they've registered, job briefs for workshop assistants, and then gathering information for the performers. So it's about 38 pages, and it just covers a lot of the basic information and ideas to help you kind of brainstorm. It's about the cost of a meal out, but it'll save you a lot of hassle down the trail. And one of the perks of running the Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse is that people send me stuff. So Amity was kind enough to give me a copy of this, and it's 38 pages long, but that is a packed 38 pages. And pretty much every page I was like, oh, I never would have thought of that. I'm really glad you mentioned that. So there's a lot of stuff in here that's not at all obvious. So some of it is things that, seem like common sense, except that I didn't think of them. And some of it is stuff that is coming from Amity's background in finance and in business, which I just don't have the expertise for. So I definitely recommend it. And those of you who are listening, sorry, go ahead. There's also the top secret workshop host survival kit, which is what every workshop host needs, is the survival kit. So it gives you a list of everything that you need to put in the survival kit that you can bring with you wherever you host your event for those emergencies and what-if situations.
That was actually one of my favorite pages in this thing because there are things where it's like, oh, I never would have thought of that. Like a sewing kit, even if you're not performing. Well, duh, because if people in your show have a costume failure, that's going to mess up your show's lineup.
Exactly.
I just gave away something from your book. I'm sorry. So for those of you who want that, if you're listening on the webcast, right now there's a link on the left-hand side that says Event Hosting Guide, and that will take you to the page. For anybody who's listening to this after the fact, you can go to raqon.net, that's RAQ-ON.net, and if you go to the classes section and then professional dancers and scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, you're going to find something especially cool because Amity has a little something special for Clubhouse listeners. You want to tell us about that?
Sure, yes. Not only are you getting the workshop host booklet, but you're actually getting budgeting spreadsheets. We all know how much time it takes to put together spreadsheets. So these spreadsheets literally have lines of all the potential ideas of expenses that you might incur. And all you have to do is in the colored Excel spreadsheet, type in what you expect to spend, and it automatically spits out your break-even point. And you can actually play with it by putting the number of spots, the number of hours the instructor teaches, whether or not they are charging on a percentage basis or an hourly basis, and it'll automatically spit out how much you need to charge just to break even. And then you can also play with it to see if you want to make a little bit of a profit, how much you can charge. So they're very, very helpful to put it all together. And so as part of the Clubhouse deal, you'll get those for free at the same price of just the normal booklet.
And how long is that good for?
It's good until November 1st.
Okay, so you've got to get that by the end of the month. That's November 1st, 2003, for those of you who are listening after the fact. And so you ladies will get, you folks, and maybe guys, will get a free upgrade to include those spreadsheets instead of having to pay extra for them. So that is a good deal. All right. So I'm going to take a look at the Q&A section. So again, those of you who are on the phone or Skype, press *2 to raise your hand. And those of you who are listening on the webcast, you can type in your question in the box at left. It looks like we've got a question from Melissa, who is either in LA or Louisiana. I'm not sure which that acronym means. And she says, I know you said it before, but can you name the items you see in the media kit? Because some instructors do not like to post their workshop descriptions.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of that. Can you say that again?
Sure. She said that, you said it before, but can you name the items that you prefer that instructors include in the media kit?
Oh, to name the items? Yes. Mm-hmm. A listing of workshop topics. So, for example, your specialties. And, so usually it's just a short, maybe 150 to 200 words or less so that you can copy and paste them into the host website or the marketing materials. So if you're a specialist in CITE or CLEGE or ZILS, you'd have your workshop name and then a short, brief description of all the different workshop options, and then also to list on there how long they are. Because I've had a lot of workshop topics. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. But I book my workshops in 2-hour slots. So if it's something that takes 4 hours to fill, I need to decide whether or not I want to spend the whole day on that or pick on 2 separate topics so people can choose whether or not they want to do both or one or the other. So the descriptions in the media kit would also include all the workshop topics and the length of time. A bio of different lengths is also helpful. A lot of dancers, on their website have this really, really long bio, and I don't have space for that. I can refer people to your website, but just a short, brief bio, couple sentences, and then for more information, contact. Other information is photos. They're good, high-quality resolution photos. Different ones with different backgrounds are very helpful, or if they're topic-related. So, for example, if you are teaching Gulf dances, you want something showing that style of dance. White backgrounds are helpful because then we can Photoshop, we can just copy and paste that specific outline. If you do use colored backgrounds, just make sure that it's just exciting enough so that it can go easily on a flyer. The other thing that I like, because I'm not as Photoshop savvy as I'd like to be, is if you have a photo with lots of space around it so that I can actually use the photo as the background and fill in the text and the information around the dancer's photo.
Cool. Now, I hope that didn't give anybody any blips, but my cat actually just hung up on all of us. So I just reconnected now. I hope everybody can still hear me. All right. So Tanya in Atlanta also asks where on the website are the booklets. So I'm just going to reiterate. If you go to req-on.net, req-on.net, in the header of the page, there's a section for classes. And under the classes heading in the pop-out menu, there's a link for professional dancers. And that takes you to a page that has Amity services for professionals. So these are things like coaching services or products. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of that page, you get the heading that says Special Clubhouse Deal with Nadira Jamal. So I hope that answers your question, Tanya. If not, go ahead and ask another question to clarify. Again, folks who are on the call or Skype, you can press *2 to raise your hand. And those of you who are on the webcast, you can type in your question in the box at left. And it looks like we have Candace who's got a question. Hi, Candace.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to hear from you.
Good, good. It's awesome to hear from you guys too. I joined the call about halfway through, so forgive me if I'm asking something that you've already answered. But I was just wondering if you have any advice about requesting people to volunteer to help out at workshop events or, you know, shows and stuff. Is that something that you might suggest doing, like a contra, like they get workshops in exchange or tickets to the show, or I'm not sure if you have any advice to give about handling volunteers.
Yes, volunteers can come from all different places. It can be a close friend, it can be a dancer, it can be a non-dancer. Sometimes a lot of people offer it to their students so that the students can participate. It's better to know somebody in advance so that you know that they're reliable.
Yeah.
The other thing is if you give somebody a benefit, they're more apt to follow through.
Great.
So if you give them workshop spots, they're more apt to follow through with the whole process.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great question, Candace. Okay. So we also have a question that was submitted in advance from a dancer who couldn't attend. And she says that she'd love to hear if you have any suggestions on the care and feeding of special guest dancers. And she says that obviously every guest is different, but if you've never hosted a special guest, and by that I assume she means like a big name dancer, you know, what are some of the considerations that might not immediately come to mind? So any special touches that you can do to make them feel welcome and well taken care of?
Yes. Always find out whether or not they want to stay in a hotel or if they prefer to stay in either your house or in a guest room or an inn. A lot of dancers, depending on their traveling schedules, have lived in hotels, and the last thing they want to do is go to another hotel. Sometimes they like to have that personal connection of staying with the organizer. Other ones, they're on board so much that they need that time in the hotel to check up on emails, to call family, to schedule their next workshop. The other thing to consider is whether or not they have allergies to pets or allergies to specific foods. Other things to consider is if they have people traveling with them. Some people travel with an assistant, or sometimes they have children that are following them around and they have an assistant taking care of the child. Other things to consider is music or merchandise. You know, if you try to travel with a box of merchandise, you understand that airports are in utter pain and there's fear of losing thousands of dollars of merchandise in customs or in lost baggage. So you might even offer to have them mail it to you in advance. So that way it's already here on the day of, and that's one less thing that they have to worry about. The other benefit to that is that you can pre-sell to students as well to get them excited about the workshops.
I never would have thought of that. Cool. All right. So, another question that we've got, this is also from someone who submitted it in advance, says she also wonders if there are any strategies for playing nice in the sandbox in an area where there are a lot of dancers and therefore lots of workshops. So
yes.
In her area, people bring in big names pretty frequently, and she worries that oversaturation is one of the reasons why people aren't making a lot of money. And she wants to know if there are any etiquette rules that may need to be, said out loud, or any guidelines about how to work with other people in your area and other events?
Yeah, and it depends area by area, and unfortunately there's always somebody in the sandbox that doesn't necessarily want to play nice. But in general, if everybody works together, everybody's more successful. For example, in New England, there's actually dance calendars that all the workshop organizers post as soon as they know that they potentially might want to host something on that weekend. They post it on a Google Calendar that says, save the date, this person, and then all the organizers can kind of plan around it. The other way is to send out, hey, FYIs on Facebook or any listservs or any other local websites, or even just email everybody and say, hey, by the way, I'm thinking about hosting this person. Are there any conflicts on this date? And again, that's where planning in advance really works to your benefit. The other benefit of that, on the side note, is that you can also barter with other workshop hosts. So, for example, I might see an event over in Massachusetts that I want to go to, and then somebody might see mine. We will actually just swap workshop spots. And it's so much easier. And then I'm able to attend workshops, and they're able to attend mine. So the earlier that you get it out, the better. The other thing is that you can also claim the same date every year. So, for example, Labor Day weekend, you're always going to have an event. The downfall of that is that sometimes your instructor that you might want to host that year may not be available and already booked. So it's kind of like a catch-22. You can choose a specific date every year and have that annual event, and people will become loyal because of that, because they know every year they're going to be busy. Otherwise, network, talk, in person is always the best. Email and Facebook, you can kind of lose the emotion and whatnot, but it's still better than nothing. So send out the save the date. Send out, hey, FYI, I'm thinking about hosting this person. And the other benefit to that is that you can also start building a network so you can swap flyers and share events. So it becomes more of a community rather than a competition. It is harder in bigger cities because there could be an oversaturation of events. So the more that you can space them out, the better. And also work with other people. For example, offer them discounts if they bring their students. If you bring 5 students, you come for free, or book everybody all at once and you can get 10 or 20% off. That's also very helpful. It's hard because it depends by area, how saturated the markets are.
Gotcha. That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well, I think it's helpful. Our person who asked is not on the call, so I hope that's great. If not, you're on Facebook, right?
Yep.
Are you at all open to having people ask you questions there?
What's that?
Are you at all open to having people ask you questions on Facebook if you're not still available?
Oh, yeah, totally. Anybody can contact me on Facebook, through email, by phone, by all means.
Awesome. And I'll include links to all of those things when I send out the show notes. Let's see. We also got a question from Nadia in New Mexico, who asks if you have to do a performance at the end of a workshop.
No. You do not always have to do a performance at the end of the workshop. And some dancers that travel a lot, sometimes they're burnt out and they're exhausted, and sometimes it's nice. What we do sometimes is that if the host doesn't want to do a show, or if we just don't have the venue available for a show, we'll all go out to dinner. And let me tell you, those dinners are just as much fun, if not more fun, than actually performing. You get a whole bunch of belly dancers at an Italian restaurant with wine, and you never know what's going to come out.
I've been to dance conferences that are like that.
Right. However, there are people who come to workshops for the performance opportunities, especially in rural areas where there's nothing else available. There's not restaurants or there's not gigs. And a lot of students, they use those event shows as an opportunity to get their feet wet. So there's pros and cons to both sides. It just depends on your area. You can always take polls, too. Another option is like Amy Smith from Belly Dance New England. She's working on a documentary on belly dance in Boston. Instead of having a performance at the end of the night, you could always have a showing of something that other dancers are working on in the area. The other option is if you have restaurants, you could have a field trip to one of the local restaurants instead of a show.
Oh, yeah, I see that that happen in the Boston area. It actually worked really well. We all kind of piled into various cars and went out together, and so we still got to see dancing and enjoy it, but it wasn't the workshop host's problem to organize.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people come to workshops not only to learn, but for the camaraderie, the community. So as long as you're still providing opportunities for community, I think you'll still be successful.
Awesome. So another question that we had in advance, Alia Thabit, who you know and was actually one of the guests on the Clubhouse in the past, asks, what tips do you have for people who want to break into the workshop circuit?
Definitely the media kit, making sure that that's available. I have mixed feelings about people contacting me via email saying, hey, by the way, I'm available for workshops. I'm not sure how well that works for other people. I don't necessarily feel that would encourage me to host them. I think meeting face-to-face or talking over the phone works better. If you're planning on hosting workshops, making it as easy as possible. And also, networking and reaching out and supporting events. I like to host dancers that support other people's events as well. So the more that you're out in the community, the more that it makes me want to host you. I don't know if that works necessarily for everybody, but if I see dancers out in the community and performing and helping out with other events and just being part of an active community, I have more of an urge to host them.
Gotcha. That's really good. Now, we also have a question from Treasure Marshall in Texas, who asks if you have any specific advice on marketing. So any particular tips that have worked for you in the past?
Yes, a good mix of marketing is very important because we have so many different age gaps in belly dance, and it depends on the area as well. Because, social media is still relatively new. A lot of dancers used to get in the mail. I used to get really excited as a baby belly getting mail saying up and coming next event. So having a good mix of marketing promotional materials is helpful. So, for example, on Facebook, creating a Facebook event or even having a Facebook page just for your event. Having a website is pretty much a must, or using like brown paper bag tickets or Eventbrite for your event. And posting YouTube clips every once in a while. So if you have an event, post, hey, by the way, we've seen this clip of this dancer performing. Isn't this amazing? Or posting her bio, or posting a project that they're working on, or if they just released a DVD or a CD. So people are constantly engaged. Because if I don't know about everybody else, but I probably have 200 or 300 event invites outstanding on Facebook, and there's no way I'm going to get through them. But the ones that I can connect with is when people post regularly about the dancer, the information, so it's a constant reminder.
Mm-hmm.
Giving paper flyers to other teachers to provide to their students, or if you go to a community hospital where they have a table that's available to promote information, or even buying a program ad in other local area recitals. That's always helpful too. Facebook also has the ability to buy promotions. So for $30, you can say, I want every female between the age of 20 and 75 in this area who has a like of belly dancing. And on the right side, it will show them the ad for your event. So you might reach new markets that way. The biggest thing is networking, making sure you have printed materials, that you have YouTube, that you have Facebook, and you can even do an interview. Another example is Belly Dance New England. We have a Amy Smith runs a main website where we all can post our upcoming events so people can go to a central location. Those are a workshop host lifesaver because you can also do interviews in advance.
Like this one.
No. Right, exactly. So that's helpful too, but it's having a good mix. It just really isn't very helpful to me personally, advertising to the general public, even for shows, because most of the shows that we do in our area are very intimate and small. My studio only seats 30 people, so it's pretty easy to sell out based on, all the workshop participants. But if we're going to do a bigger show like we did Lila of Cairo, I spent, probably $500 on newspaper advertisements, and I did a poll at the very beginning to find out how everybody heard, and maybe 2 people raised their hands. So for $40, for $500, I got $40 worth of income. So it's really depends on your area, and if you are going to do a public show, maybe going on the local radio or doing interviews with the press releases with the local newspapers. So it's there's the advertising for the workshop, and then there's the advertising for the show, and it's kind of 2 different markets.
That's really important. When I started learning about business and marketing, it was really driving home to me that the audiences for shows and for instruction in a lot of ways can be very different. So you have to have different wording and sometimes different places that you advertise for each one.
Right, exactly. And that took me a long time to learn, too.
That's good. I'm not alone. Money. Okay. So Jenny in Burbank, California, said that she didn't hear how far in advance you should start marketing or advertising, so she was hoping you could repeat that. But she also asks, don't you run the risk of people forgetting if you market too soon?
Yes, and that's why that constant reminder, such as posting about the events, a mailing list, reminders, and interviews are all very helpful. I do mine at least a year in advance, and I send out the save the dates, and then as I get closer, I start to release the information. Another thing that you can do that I find really helpful, and it also might be because I have a dance studio, is that I do my schedule for the entire year. Like I'm working on 2014 calendar right now. We take photos and glamour shots and whatnot. We actually make a printed calendar. So dancers go home in December with a calendar for 2014 with everything marked nice and neatly on a calendar. Another thing you can do is provide stickers. So you could mail stickers to all the local teachers or give them to your students so that they can put them on their calendars as a save the date.
So it probably has to be small enough to fit into the square on a regular calendar.
Right. Or magnets for their fridge, too. You know, I've seen people do that for weddings, and I keep meaning to try that for workshops, too, because you could have a beautiful picture of one, you know, your special guest dancer. And with everybody's business cards, I make magnets and put them on my fridge. So that might be another option. But, yeah, as soon as you know, get it out there. I mean, 3 months lead time is really imperative, at least, to be successful, unless you have a big market and it's not oversaturated with other events. Like, for example, right now I'm looking at the Halloween events, and I'm so overwhelmed because there's so many of them. I don't know which one to go to.
Okay. So I'm going to make this last call for questions. So if you're on the phone or Skype, you can press *2. And if you're on the webcast, you can type in the question at the box at left. And we have a comment from Candace in Auckland who says, not a question, just a thank you. And she says that she's buying your booklet right now because she's hosting Aziza in New Zealand next year, and it's going to be really helpful. So she says thanks.
Oh, yeah, congratulations. If you have any questions, just call her. Or if you just need a venting moment, call.
Awesome. Okay, I don't see any hands raised yet, but I do know that there is a delay of about 15 seconds on the webcast. So I'm going to give people just another second to get those in. Okay, and I think that we are done then. So thank you so much, Amity.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks, everybody, for coming. So this is the end of our call, but that doesn't mean that the conversation has to end. We have a private Facebook group just for the Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse, and I'll send out an email to the list shortly with an invitation. If you're not already on our email list, you can join at bellydancegeek.com/clubhouse. And in that email, I'll also include the link to the call recording if you want to listen to it again with pencil in hand so you can take notes. And I'm also going to include a link to the Clubhouse survey. So I'd really like to get your feedback. I run the Clubhouse, but it's for all of us. So I really want to get your input on what topics you'd like to learn about, what speakers you'd like to hear from, or any other ways that I can improve the Clubhouse and make sure that you get the most geeky love from it. Our next call will be in the 2nd or 3rd week in November, and the details are still TBD, so I'll keep you posted. But the last thing that I want to say is that the Clubhouse is the come-on-in kind of Clubhouse, not the no boys allowed kind. So if you know anybody who'd like to join us, you can invite them at bellydancegeek.com/clubhouse. And until next time, happy dancing! Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Nadira.
Thanks for listening. For more geek-tacular resources, visit bellydancegeek.com.